Hey advisors, are you thinking of leaving your agency? So maybe you're thinking of it because maybe there's a lack of mentorship, there's lack of growth, maybe you're not getting results, your manager don't care about you, yada yada, and all that stuff. Now, if you are considering, watch this video, and this video is specially created for you. For all of you who don't know me, my name is Ben. I'm founder of Authentic Advisory Systems, previously known as 2XL Closings. We did some form of like rebranding and all that stuff to, to make it more aligned and congruent to really the things that we are doing. Okay, but the whole reason why we are creating these videos and we're on YouTube and everything else is because I want to document down all these lessons that I've been learning while coaching other advisors, and hopefully these lessons can really help you to become happy, purposeful, and authentic. Now let's dive deep into this video. Okay, so the entire purpose of this video is to provide like consideration and perspective in terms of like in your decisions to leave or to stay in the agency, right? So I was both a FA as well as a manager before, and now I'm really coaching advisors, I'm coaching managers and even directors, right? And so I like to believe I have a little bit more authority on this particular space because I get this question all the time as well. Okay, so just to make it clear, first of all, I have absolutely no issues with you leaving or staying at agency. I'm just running through my own thought process and things that I share with some of our advisor clients, because I really get these questions like at least once or twice a month, right? They tell me they might consider leaving, yada yada, and all that stuff. So I hope these lessons will be able to serve you in your decision making process if you're considering to leave. In all my last 5-6 years, right, of experience in the industry, I mean, I've seen so many advisors leaving agency, leaving a company, jumping to another one because with the hopes that they'll be better off in the new environment. Obviously, there's a tons of like reasons for leaving, maybe it's remuneration, maybe it's culture, mental health, environment, yada yada, and all that stuff. And that's really fantastic, if they're able to find an agency or an environment that is overall better for this particular advisor, right? Now, of course, there's a lot of nuances because, to leave from one company or one agency to another, usually it's from one company to another company, right? Because if you want to switch between agencies, one agency to another agency within the same company, usually not the easiest, and usually companies don't really encourage it themselves, right? So usually when you jump from one company to another company, there's a lot of things to consider, right? And there's a lot of uncertainties, because what if you leave and then you reach the other company and then end up they didn't deliver what they promised, right? And all their things, what if you sacrifice all the recurring commissions that you have, etc., right? Today I'm going to share with you 3 key perspectives that I will run through, and then I'll give you 2 more bonus one, okay? So that you have a better idea to consider, or better kind of like spectrum of like options to consider, okay? The first one is, have you done your best? Okay, no, I know it sounds weird. I know it might be what the hell we're talking about, but like the first one is, have you done your best? Okay, so stick with me, right? So is this whole idea of like co-responsibility. Usually when someone finds, an advisor usually finds kind of unhappiness in their agency usually with their bosses, right? If they are manager, with directors, so on and so forth. They'll usually put a lot of blame, right? They'll say the manager is bad, they'll say the mentor is bad, there's no growth, there's no training, there's no blah, 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 right? There's no follow-up, there's no communication, there's like a lot of things, right? I think it's very easy to really kind of like put the blame and to look externally and say that, hey, it's your fault, it's not mine. As a manager, you're supposed to do ABC, but you didn't. I see other agencies doing that, but then you are not doing it, and therefore, I think you suck, and this is one of the biggest reasons why I want to leave. It's not wrong. It's totally not wrong. It's totally valid. The point I want to encourage here is, right, the idea of co-responsibility, right? Because it always takes 2 hands to clap. So if your manager isn't proactive in providing you growth, or proactive in really helping you with the trainings, or helping you in areas that you have challenges, right? Then the next question is, you want to ask yourself, like, look internally, right? Have you done your best to communicate? Have you done your best to ask for training, ask for support, ask for help in the way that you want it? And then let's say the manager doesn't help you. Then have you done your best to communicate to your boss and say that, hey boss, I know you're busy, I know all these things, but I'm really struggling with this. I would love to have maybe twice a week kind of a training personally with you, so that I want to learn, so that I can earn more money, I can, and we can all win together. Would that be okay with you? Have you done your best to communicate all these things, right? Because the key thing here is that sometimes so here's the thing, right? When we put the blame onto other people, or looking out externally beyond ourselves, right? We tend to become victims in that sense, because when you look outside and we push the blame onto others, right, we are also giving away our own power and control to other people, right? Because then it's about them, my circumstances is a reflection of like their efforts, their lack of support, everything. And then it makes you feel very disempowered, right? Because then you're kind of like stuck, and then you have, they're just blaming everybody. You can't really move forward as much as you want to, right? So when you adopt the idea of co-responsibility, this really allows you to ask yourself, like, have you done your best? Now, if you have done your best to really communicate, to really ask for support, to really, look for support elsewhere in terms of like going for programs or like going for courses, going for referrals, whatever it is, right? If you have really done your best and doing all this, then maybe it is a valid concern valid reason that, okay, cool, you know what? Screw this. I have already done my best, no regrets. Let me just leave this agency because this agency is shit, or like this boss isn't the best. But I think first, before we even jump to that, we ask ourselves, like, have we done our best, right? So here are a few questions I usually ask our clients, right? I say, like, first of all, like, have you done your best to learn from others, right? Outside of your own environment. Have you also done your best to put in the work that is required? This is the key one, right? Because sometimes there are so many advisors that have encountered that, didn't put in the work that as much as is needed or required, and then start blaming others, right? So I'll give you an example. So let's say, a very generic one is that, okay, let's say the boss say, okay, you do this prospecting method, you do this particular cold call, or whatever method that they're doing to get appointments, right? Or do whatever strategies. The advisor receive this strategy or this advice or whatnot, right? But then only tried once or twice and then say that, you know what, it's not working, this is shit, I'm still struggling. But what could have been done to make it effective, right, is that you could have put in like 6 hours of practicing this particular objection handling or like this particular presentation before going for the appointment, right? Maybe you could have like spent 12 hours prospecting, or you can spend like basically more volume, right, doing more of it. Because sometimes a lot of times I get the idea that from a lot of advisors, right, that the advice given by the managers doesn't work. Between you say the strategy doesn't work, right? But what I realize also is that it's not that the strategy doesn't work, it's that there's not enough volume of effort and number of hours and work put in to make the strategy work. It just requires some more effort and time and everything else, right? So my point here is that, have you done your best to put in the work and effort required to make it work, rather than seeing other people and then seeing what they can do for you, right? Because I can tell you more often than not, when you really put in all the amount of concentration, effort, and work into a particular strategy or things that you've been told to do, more often than not, you tend to work out a little better. So ask yourself, have you done your best, right? The third one is that, have you done your best to manage conflicts? I mean, sure, sometimes there are politics, sometimes your boss is just being an ass, for example, maybe the bad mood, whatnot, right? And it might not be your fault. Like, it might not even be your fault. You might feel like, like totally indignant and like you feel upset, angry, and everything else, right? But here's the thing, right? Stick with me, right? But it is your responsibility to take on how you want to respond to the situation and move forward with this. So I repeat, it might not be your fault that this is happening right now, or this is happening to you right now. It might not be your fault. It might not even totally has nothing to do with you, right? But it is your responsibility to own up and to choose how you want to respond and move forward with this. Okay? So these are three things, right? Have you done your best to learn from others outside of your environment? Have you put in the work that's required? Have you managed conflicts? And take responsibility of your own life and really put it in control, right? To really how to move forward with your manager, your boss, or whatnot. Okay? So the reason why I'm like putting a lot of emphasis on this co-responsibility idea, right, is that, and why I'm so passionate, is because I can tell you based on my own personal observations, I have advisors that, obviously, blah, 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 blame the agency, whatnot, the company not good, yada, yada, moved over to another agency just to realize that the situation didn't change. Like, they're still stuck, they're still poor, they're still broke, they're still not really, earning a lot of money and whatnot, right? Still don't have mentorship and whatnot. Even though, like, when they first got into that agency, or they got sold the idea of like, oh, it's better, it's more prestigious, there's more coaching, there's more mentorship, whatnot, right? Now, it might be the agency's fault, or maybe it could be something to do with themselves. Maybe they just don't want to put in the work. Because you see, no matter how many agencies you go, if the support is provided or given, right, and then you are not surviving, you are not learning, you're not moving forward, right, maybe the problem lies with you rather than your environment, right? Maybe the problem lies with you. Maybe you're lazy, maybe you're just not working hard enough. Maybe you have some mindset, you have some limiting beliefs that's holding you back, right? And there's this particular advisor jump from one agency, let's say company A to company B, and then stay there for about like 3-4 months, and then move from company B to company C, all within the span of like, I think 8 months or so, and just realize that all these 3 agencies that he or she was in, right, he or she didn't get that breakthrough in that sense, right? So it's kind of like from one jump. So maybe the problem might be lying with that particular individual. Okay, so the whole point here is that you want to ask yourself and answer this question truthfully, which is, have you done your best in every aspect of your efforts, of your initiatives to make it work in this particular agency or in this particular company, right? If you have done your best, I think it's a good chance that you might really just want to move on. Now, if you haven't, then maybe you want to think about what you can do to make that change, because change comes from within. So when you're able to look internally and look at that change, then maybe you can really facilitate change on the external reality in your agency or environment or whatnot. So that's number one, right? So first perspective, have you done your best? Number two is expectations. Expectations and role. One of the biggest misconception in my own experience and perspective, right, is that we tend to see our managers and directors as equals to coaches and trainers. Okay, I repeat, we tend to see our directors, managers, or our bosses as a coach, as a trainer, right? These two things. You might be thinking like, but Ben, shouldn't that be the case? Because they are the ones that brought us in, they should be training us, they should be coaching us. If not, how we earn money, right? Now, I know you might be thinking of that, right? And I totally get you, right? And here's something that I just want to share so that you can something consider, right? So what I realized is that, and because I was a manager before, first of all, you need to understand that when you go from FC to management, most of the time in the company trainings, they don't teach you exactly how to coach. They don't teach you exactly how to do the trainings. They don't have a very nice syllabus, coming out and then saying that, hey, you know what, this is what you do, this is what you do. No, right? Now, if you went through management training in the company, usually, it has a lot to do with tracking activities, right? Tracking BSc grading, tracking money, basically, right? The allowance schemes. Are you hitting the targets? Are you, fill in the forms, make sure admin is done, make sure approval is done, all the administrative stuff, right? If there's anything you want to do appeal, you want to do blah, 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 right? And what I realized, right, is that the role, and this is a big one, right? If you understand this, then it will definitely empower you a lot. So what I realized is that the role of a manager and director, one of the roles of a manager or director is to hit KPIs. I repeat, one of the main roles of a manager and director is to hit KPIs, which is why you might have realized that, your bosses are always asking you about targets, right? And you cannot blame them for that because they are doing their job, because this is their role. It is their role, right? So the whole point here is that if you look at it, right, because you see, your manager has a KPI because your KPI usually given maybe by themselves or by their director, right? And then your director has KPI. Your director's KPI is given by who? Maybe your BDM, maybe your chief agency officer, your chief distribution officer, whatever, right? Those in the corporate, right? So then you have one more tier that's giving KPIs. Now, who's giving them KPIs? The CEO. Now, who's giving the CEO KPI or driven by that? Shareholders. So there's further up the food chain, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're a shareholder, you invest in a company, the whole point is to create profits, to make profits, right? This whole idea is to make money. So therefore, in order to make money, then there's KPI that needs to be managed and hit. And it goes down to the CEO, it goes down to CDO, it goes down to your BDMs or whatever it is, and then it goes down to your director, and then it goes down to your manager, and it goes down to you. Does that make sense? So you gotta understand the whole chain, right? Therefore, the whole role is really about hitting KPIs. That is the truth. Okay? Yeah, I mean, at least that's how I see it, right? So that being said, so how does this apply to us in our own context? Very simple. So if you look at your manager and director playing the function, right, of hitting KPIs and tracking your sales targets, etc., and then if your manager is doing that, then you got a very good manager. He or she is doing their job, right? However, if you also see your manager and your director as a coach, as a trainer, then they might not fulfill that part. And the truth here is that, your director and manager, right, need not exactly give you that support. Honestly, they have more or less zero obligations, right, to really give you that kind of support that you need. They can just run through the KPIs. They can just say, okay, you do this, and then you're off on your own. There's no moral obligation that, you die must give you 10 trainings a week and whatnot. Really. Like there's no obligation for that. Okay, now obviously in the competitive environment within the industry, obviously there's agencies, amazing agencies that provide this kind of support, and I think that's fantastic, right? And that's actually a very good to have. That's something that the agency took initiative to do it, right? However, this doesn't mean that it's a moral responsibility or obligations that your manager director has to give you those training just as in those other agencies, right? The whole point here is, if you see the role, if you see your manager and director, just imagine you see them, right, as someone that just only manages KPI, which is technically the truth and that's their job. And then they are really, bargaining about your KPIs and trying as much as they can to help you with it, right? Then you can be grateful for the very fact that they are doing their jobs. Now, then what happens to the role of coaching, mentorship, everything else? Now, if you have a manager who can do both roles, you are in a very great place, which I don't think this video will therefore be that applicable to you, right? But if let's say they only fulfill the role of someone that hits KPI, and then they don't fulfill the role of a coaching / training trainer or coach, right? Then maybe you want to find somewhere else, right? Maybe you want to find an external program or coaches out there that's able to provide you that kind of coaching and support, right? Because the truth here is that no matter how much, even one of the constraints, and this is really just insights, so that, and by the way, I'm not defending a manager, whatnot. I'm just explaining and sharing with you like my own experience as well when I was a manager, right? Is that because our main role is to hit KPIs and everything else, then there's a lot of constraints on us, right? Especially, you see, we have to manage a team, and then we have to do, sometimes some of us as managers, we have to do sales, right? So then that's like another time constraint kind of thing. And then with sales, remember, before your manager became a manager, he or she was a salesperson, which means to say, or an advisor, which means to say they have clients. Then they need to service their own clients as well, right? They need to make sure that they need to make claims. There's a lot of things, right? And then there's trainings, and then there's coaching, and then there's meetings with the director, and then a whole lot of things, right? So there are a lot of constraints, right? So basically, in short, even if a manager wants to really help you, there are really constraints, right? The first one is constraint of time, right? There's only so much time they can really help you, or they can really give it to you, because they also have their own personal lives. And for those managers or directors that are a little bit older, has family and have kids, their time is very, very precious, and it's not easy to provide it themselves, right? So that's one, time, right? Number two, expertise. You see, your managers and directors are not, doing the training and coaching every day, right? They have so many other things they need to do, run an agency, blah, blah, blah. But they might not exactly have the expertise or domain expertise in certain areas. For example, social media, right? Some of your manager and director might be freaking good at referrals, for example, or like social prospecting or lifestyle prospecting, but they might not be good at social media. Then if you want your manager to coach you on social media, then how is that going to work out well? Like, you cannot blame, because like they have no way to become like experts in in different fields, right? They can only be at best expert in one field, or you're generalist in all areas, right? So there's the other constraint is expertise. The third one is commitment, like I talk about, right? Because there's sales, and then there's recruitment, and then there's management, and then they have their own clients to service, etc., etc., right? So when you really take one step back and then you look at the role of like your director and manager, it's really not the easiest for them. And therefore, if you're really just lacking the coaching, the mentorship, the training, and everything else portion, right, you might want to source out somewhere, right? Now, of course, you might go to another agency, and the agency will pitch to you and then say that, hey, you know what, this is what we have over here, don't worry, we'll provide you leads, blah, 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 and things like that, right? But you also need to understand the structure, more often than not, the structure in one company and the agency and the other, right, and the other company and agency, and more or less is going to be similar, right? Which means to say that it's still the same manager, or of those few managers, and then there's going to be a lack of time, there's going to be a expertise, the lack of expertise, and there's going to be commitment issues, etc., etc., right? So I'm just sharing all this so that you can have a good idea of like a perspective of like, maybe you might not want to put so much efforts and so much emphasis, right, on making your manager or director coach you, right? Because there just be a chance that they might not be able to do that for you based on the things that I shared about, right? Yeah, so that's kind of like the second perspective, which is really about expectations and the role. Now, that being said, by the way, if you do want to, you really do look at a manager, director as someone that coaches and trains you and everything else, right? Then yeah, cool. Maybe if the current one doesn't fulfill that, maybe you really want to do look out for some other agencies or agency leaders that provide that. Okay, I'm just saying, right? So that's second, expectations and role. Now the third one is environment. One of the biggest analogy, if you have watched my other videos, right, that I love to give when it comes to environment, is this. If today you are in a Ferrari and then you press your foot on the accelerator, what do you think is going to happen? The Ferrari is going to move forward, right? On land, it's just going to move straight, right? It's going to move fast at a very accelerated pace, right? Now, if you put that same Ferrari and you're inside the same Ferrari, and we put that inside the ocean, and then you step on the accelerator, just like the previous scenario, right? What do you think is going to happen? It's probably going to sink. It's not going to move forward. Then the question that we want to ask ourselves is this a problem with the Ferrari, or is this a problem with the environment? Probably the environment, right? So therefore, what if, like the perspective, what if you are the Ferrari, just that you're not in the right environment? That could be the chance, right? So instead of changing your Ferrari, maybe you want to change the environment, right? And vice versa. That being said, when it comes to environment, there are really three levels of environment, the way I see it. One is the supportive kind, the one that they give you trainings, they give you coaching, they give you KPIs, they are there for you, they provide one-to-ones, whatever it is, right? And all your colleagues around you, it's not only managers, but your colleagues around you are also relatively abundant. They love to care for you. They just genuinely want to help you and see the better for you, right? Now, that's a very, very supportive kind of agency or supportive kind of environment, right? Now, the second one is neutral. So neutral environment are usually the kinds whereby, it's just like that, right? They are not like going the extra mile to really help you. They're just more like, okay, you know what, let's do the bare minimum. It's like that. They neither cause you harm, like they're not negative. They're not like pulling you down, but at the same time, they are not really pushing you forward, right? You're kind of like in the middle in that sense. You're kind of like in the middle. So this is like kind of like neutral environment. The third one, that would be toxic, right? So toxic environment is the one whereby, they ostracize you, right? Maybe they ostracize you based on your performance. And it's, from a management standpoint, segregating top performers and middle performers and like underachievers and everything else, right? It's usually a normal strategy, and that works out relatively okay. But if they tend to ostracize, meaning to say, they look at you like, oh, you only earn 3K a month kind of, or 2.2K a month kind of like advisor, then they're like, don't give too much shit about you. And then it just kind of like, just kind of ostracize socially, right? And it's kind of like make you feel like you're shitty about yourself. You don't feel good enough. You feel the odd one out. Yeah, that's what I call kind of like a toxic environment, right? Another one, there's still a toxic environment. Another symptom for that is a lot of politics. Like you don't feel safe, right? The key word, right, is that you don't feel safe. In a toxic environment, you cannot feel safe. And what I mean by safe is that you don't feel like you can openly share your opinions, your views, your concerns with your manager or even with colleagues around you. You are always constantly watching and defending your back. Like you're afraid, like you don't know what this person might say. And then when you talk to your colleagues and you're like, you got to tread carefully. So this is kind of like a toxic environment. Or sometimes the third one, in fact, one of the other symptoms of toxic environment is that there's a lot of comparisons. Comparison in the way whereby, let's say there's a top performer, or maybe let's say you're 3 years in the industry, and then there's another 6 months old kind of like advisor, right? And the 6 months old is clocking in more production than you. And then the comparison is like, hey, you know what? Even a young one can do better than you. What the hell are you doing? Right? Like there's a lot of like putting you down. Now, that is toxic, because if we are always feeling that we're not good enough, then how can we perform the best, right? It's like, instead of being on land, we are in ocean, and we are just the same Ferrari, they're just sinking and we're just going down, no matter how much we try. I repeat, if you don't feel like good enough and you're always in a toxic environment, no matter how hard you try on stepping on the accelerator, how much you try to put in your effort, you will always sink. You cannot move forward. Look at your environment right now, right? You can rate. Is it a supportive environment? If it is, then I think that's something that you might really want to consider staying, because having a supportive environment is something that is very, very hard. Like, let me tell you, it's very, very hard, especially in the industry like this, right? Whereby there's more salesy, it's more cutthroat, etc., right? So if you have a supportive environment, I think that's fantastic, right? Now, you have a neutral one. You need not neutral if you're in a neutral environment whereby they're not pushing you, but they're not putting you down. They are letting you do your own things. You might not necessarily want to leave, right? You might want to join other coaching programs. You want to find and seek help somewhere, just like talk about co-responsibility, right? So these are the two. Now, if you're in a toxic environment, I think it's a very huge sign that you might not really want to be there. That's my own personal opinion. You might really want to be an environment that puts you down and makes you feel like you're not good enough, because it's just hard. It's just hard, right? It's just hard. It doesn't even affect your production only. It affects like a lot of mental health, right? A lot of calls or coaching calls I go for that's requested one-on-ones with some of our clients, right? A lot to do with mental health, A lot to do with self-esteem, which is funny, right? Because, it's supposed to be a sales, prospecting kind of thing. But hey, these are real issues, right? When you're in an industry like that. Okay, so the third one is environment. Okay, so if you are in supportive neutral, I think it's okay. If you are in toxic, yeah, you might really want to get out. Okay, so that's third. So these are the 3 key things, right? I repeat, the first one is, have you done your best? Co-responsibility. Number 2, expectations and role of your managers/directors. The third one is the environment in which you are in. These are the 3 key things that I usually run through with our advisors, kind of like thought process, and kind of analyze, right? Like, where are you at? Are you at a tipping point where you really gotta leave? So these are 3 things, right? Now, I promised that I'll give you 2 more as well. So the fourth one, right? So 3 plus 2, the fourth one, right, is due diligence. So let's say in the event that you are really looking elsewhere, looking at other people, looking at other agencies, companies, whatnot, right? Have you done your due diligence to do all the background checks, to find out, in Chinese, to 打听, I think it's 打听, right? To kind of like, hey, here, what's people saying about the agency? What's the good? What's the bad? Because there's never an agency, there's never anything, right, that is all good, right? There's going to be some trade-offs, right? There's going to be some things that are not that desirable or not that ideal. And it's okay. You just got to see whether you can accept this, right? So why I say this is a big one also is because most of the time when you meet other people, managers, directors, they usually like to sell the vacation, right? They like to sell the dream. Hey, you come here, there's time flexibility. Oh, there's no mentorship. Okay, cool, you come here, right? Oh, there's no coaching. Hey, you come here. Oh, there's no culture. Oh, we have this. Oh, that, right? I mean, you cannot blame them. This is sales, right? They're just trying to recruit. And recruitment is no different from sales, right? They're just trying to sell the dream, right? And sales is also selling about a dream to solve a specific problem, right? They tend to sell and might oversell sometimes, right? So you got to be a little bit more skeptical. I wouldn't say skeptical, a little bit more practical and take everything with a pinch of salt, because some people might sell, but they might not have the substance to back it up, right? They might not have the substance to back it up. Okay, so everything comes with a price to pay, or rather, like everything comes with certain trade-offs, right? So you really want to do your due diligence to make sure as much as possible. Now it's never 100%, but I think you can get a good gauge, right? Like how this particular AL or this particular agency is like. Now, I have this saying that I always say, right, which is the grass is always greener on the other side until you're there. And sometimes you realize that it isn't that green. So I repeat again, right? The grass is always greener on the other side until you're there, and you might realize it isn't that green, right? And all you see is maybe some synthetic fake grass, right? And then below is some soil and whatnot. Okay, so basically number 4 is due diligence. You got to check it, right? Now the 5th one is basically trade-off, right? This is more like administrative, more numbers, analytical kind of analysis, right? So you look at like your recurring commissions, right? If let's say you're somebody that's 4, 5, 6 years in the industry, look at your recurring commissions, look at them and like calculate not only what you're getting this year, but calculate in the next 3, 4, 5 years, right? What are you potentially missing out? Because some of you have a lot of recurring commissions when it comes to A&H plans, for example, right? Obviously, yeah, if you're in an IFA, then of course this might not really apply to you because you can port your clients over. But if you're in a tight agency, then yes, this is one of considerations as well, right? Now, I do agree that more often than not, when you shift to another company, they will provide you certain form of compensation, usually like a buyout package, like they give you, 1.5 times if you're good, 2 times of your last 12 months income, for example, right? And they give you like basically like a scheme, a target allowance scheme, right? While it provides you good money, the other perspective to consider is that you are still back to hitting targets again, right? And is that something that you really want? Is that something that you feel comfortable with? Because some of these targets might not be that easy to hit, and you maybe in your years in the industry you are feeling comfortable, you're pretty good at where you're at, you like the way the business is done, but with the target over your head, it changes everything, right? So that is that, right? The second one is like, one of the trade-off is like clientele, right? When let's say you have 200 people that's with you right now, when you shift over, there's going to be drop-off, right? They're going to be clients that drop off, right? They're going to be people that says like, hey, you know what, unhappy with you, etc., etc. So you might really want to weigh it out as well, whether how much of your clients get affected. I think that's a big one to really consider. Another one is that if you move over to the next company or agency, do they provide better benefits, relatively speaking? Or what kind of specific benefit or things that can really help your clients, right? Because that might be a good reason why you want to leave, and something that you can justify to your clients as well, right? So that's clientele. And then the other trade-off, a perspective of trade-off, right? It's how long can you financially survive for, right? Because there's always this thing called transition cost. When you leave, usually there's a 2 weeks tender resignation period, and then after that, you need to deregister your license, and then you RNF and you get licensed again. And usually then there's reference check from one company to another company, and it takes about like 2 months usually, right? Depending on which country you're in, but in Singapore, it usually takes about 2 months to really have, from the other side all the way until getting coded in a new company. And then of course, there's time and opportunity cost, right? Because you need to study, you need to learn the new platforms, you need to learn the products, etc., right? So you want to ask yourself, like, do you have enough money tied over this period of time? And I think also the other way to look at it is that, it's not only about how much can you survive, but within these 2-3 months, how much are you trading off as well? Because if let's say you're earning 5, maybe 10 grand a month, and then those 2 months you're potentially losing 20 grand. So you got to factor in all these costs as well, right? It's kind of like the big idea of like trade-offs, looking more of like if you're in business and all that stuff, usually they say it's kind of like a benefit/cost analysis. So you might want to write that down, what's the benefits and what's the cost, right? And then the way, so this is something that I usually advise people to do. Like you write down all the benefits of the other side, and then you write down the cost of going to the other side, right? And then don't just focus on the benefits, because the benefits might have a longer list, like they might have a longer list of benefits, and the cost maybe only like 5 or 6 different bullet points for the cost, right? However, don't just look at the benefits and allow it to just determine your decision. You want to look at the cost, and then you ask yourself, are you willing to accept this cost that comes with it? Because it might just be one thing or two things, but those one or two things could mean a lot to you. You might have a lot of, it might mean a lot of significance to you, right? There's something that you might not be willing to take. So for example, let's say the other side is they offer you 600K package, they offer good benefits, culture, blah blah blah, allowance scheme, so on and so forth. But then you can only sell this product, and then maybe you cannot bring like half your clientele over, for example. Now then, is that worth it? So that's something that you got to consider. It's kind of like the big idea here. So obviously there's a lot more to talk about, but these are the 3+2 bonus key perspective or factors that I kind of run through to really kind of like help you hopefully understand whether should you stay or leave in an agency, right? As we come to the end of this video, like always understand that leaving and moving to another agency, right, or another company is never good or bad, right? It just is. What makes it good or bad is ultimately dependent on you. And there's this saying in our community that we talk about, which is how you see things is always more important than what you see. And then remember that the grass is always greener on the other side until you reach the other side, and sometimes it might not really be that green. Okay, so if I had to summarize this entire 5 key perspective over here, the first one, of course, it will be, have you done your best? Ideal core responsibility. What are your expectations and the role that you see the manager and director play? Third is the environment. Fourth is due diligence, right? And fifth is trade-off. Okay, so again, I hope this serves you. If you really like this video and you find it valuable in some sense, or you have a colleague, you have a friend that is considering leaving, maybe you can send them this video, so they can have great perspective here as well, right? So do like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Now, if it's a little more private and you really want to ask me, do drop me a direct message or a DM on my Instagram at Ben to the right, BENTOTHERIGHT. It's in the description, right? So if you want, just drop me a DM to really help to consider as well, and I'll do my best to reply and give you the value that you need. Okay, if you're really considering to leave, it's not the easiest, but it's something that it's part and parcel of the journey inside the insurance industry. Okay, so stay amazing, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next video.